Picture this. Your friend says, "I'm fine," but they roll their eyes, slam their backpack down, and they cross their arms. Do you believe the words or the nonverbals? I'm Dr. Rick Curry, and today we're going to examine nonverbal communication, the unspoken messages that sometimes shout louder than words. You see, nonverbal communication is everything that we say without words. And studies suggest that in face-to-face conversations, most of the meaning comes from our nonverbals, not the actual words themselves. Our facial expressions, our gestures, the tone of our voice, how close we stand to people, even the colors that we wear or the time that we show up to events. You see, nonverbals aren't random. They serve specific purposes. They can repeat our spoken words. For instance, if someone asks us for directions, well, we often point in the direction. They can substitute our language. We could shrug instead of saying, "I don't know." They can compliment. We could use a gentle tone to match an apology. Nonverbals can also regulate communication. We could nod to show that we're listening. We could make eye contact with the speaker. We could raise our hand in a classroom to signal that we have a question. You see, the bottom line here is that nonverbals are constantly shaping the flow and the meaning of our interaction. 5% of the effect in our communication is produced by the actual spoken words. The words that we use don't really have a lot of meaning. 45% of the message is imparted by the tone that we use, the inflection of our voice and other elements, and 50% by our body language, the movements that we make, and eye contact. You see, you can fake a smile, but if it doesn't reach your eyes, well, people know. You can say, "I'm confident," but if your hands shake, well, people see through that. Why? Because many nonverbals are involuntary. Our bodies will spill the truth or leak our true feelings even when our words are trying to hide it. You see, people may doubt your words, but they will always believe your nonverbals. Let's take a moment to watch a short video clip of a former FBI body language expert as he talks about the nonverbal body language of poker players.
Poker is an interesting game. Sitting across from players, it's their reactions to a stimulus. We have behaviors indicative of psychological discomfort that we use at home, at work, or at the poker table. So we're going to take a look at poker players and some of the body language that you'll find at a typical poker game.
All right, guys. Button is good.
Button is good. Let's do
So we'll stop right there. Look where their hands are at. Here we're looking at player number 2 and number 3, and we notice right away that their hands are on top of the cards. Some players will cage their cards. Some players will put their hands directly on top and press them down. And they may do that because the cards have now increased in value. Player number 1 tends to keep his hands very close to his body. Player number 4, she's actually withdrawn her hands from the table because when we like things, we tend to move our hands forward. When we don't like things, we tend to move the hands away.
These guys are my cards.
So as we look at player number 3, I'm often asked about players who shuffle their chips. What you're really doing is self-soothing, and this just helps you to make it through the game, and that's really all we're looking for.
Oh, come on.
Nice.
Okay, so we'll stop right there. Player number 5 is sitting there, arms crossed. You don't see a lot of activity. That doesn't mean he's not transmitting a lot of information. On down the line, I want to see where those thumbs of his are, because he holds them very close when nothing's going on. But does that change as the game evolves? If you're looking at nonverbals, it's often useful to look at them at double the speed because all the nonverbals that are critical jump out at you as though it were a caricature. All right, so stop right there. The woman in position number 4, you see her head moving around quite a bit. Player number 3, you see a lot of activity with his hands. When we look at player number 5, now his hands are fully out. This is as far as we've seen them before. At this point, we know that he's engaged and that he's interested. Now the game is out in the open. 75 to 80% of the information we need is sitting out there. What you often see is everybody's looking at their own cards or looking at the community cards rather than looking around. you should be looking around to see, well, what was the reaction? Because you're going to see that reaction again. You know, in poker, we used to say that you can have a poker face, but I countered you can't have a poker body. Somewhere it's going to be revealed. When I was in college in the early 70s, there were really no courses on nonverbal communications. You quickly realize that, to a great extent, it's really about what you can interpret from behavior. And so we talk about nonverbals because it matters, because it has gravitas, because it affects how we communicate with each other. When it comes to nonverbals, this is no small matter. We primarily communicate nonverbally, and we always will.
Some really cool analysis there. Now back to our lecture. Chances are, if I had a camera in your room, well, it would have just caught some really interesting nonverbals across your face. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at is universal facial expressions. And facial expressions, well, there are emotional blueprints. Paul Ekman found that 7 universal facial expressions exist. Now, babies show these even before they can talk, and that's why people in every culture can recognize them. Even tribes deep within the Amazon jungle that have no media exposure have shown that they understand these 7 universal facial expressions. Really cool. And that's because they're survival tools. Fear, well, it alerts other people to danger. Disgust keeps us away from things that could harm us, like spoiled food. And anger, well, it shows a readiness for us to fight, a protection mechanism. Today, we've even created a shortcut in our languages by the use of emojis. A laughing face or an angry emoji works just like expressions did for our ancestors. You see, your face is always communicating, and often more honestly than our words. You can see that this child is genuinely happy via the eyes and the facial expression. You can see sadness here. You can see disgust, and you can see anger. These are really easy for us to pick up on, regardless of culture, language, or context. We can read these easily. Now, there are 2 that I find a little bit more difficult for most people, and that is surprise and fear. Surprise and fear are hard to fake non-verbally, and this is because the role that fear and surprise often plays in the communication process. And this is instinctual because, you see, fear alerting us to danger is there designed to protect us. For us, it's a little different from our ancient ancestors. They would walk outside of their caves and, well, there could be dinosaurs that eat them. That instinctual drive to protect ourselves, to survive, exists in us as humans today. And this is why it is hard to fake fear and hard to fake surprise. If you've ever been a part of a surprise party, you know pretty instantly when that person walks into the room if they had any knowledge that that party was going to exist, because it is hard to fake surprise. You can't fake that, like these videos here.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Now let's look at eye contact. And eye contact is one of the strongest nonverbals that we have. It builds trust. It creates immediacy. It creates a sense of connection. It can even regulate our conversations. But culture changes its meaning. Here in the U.S., well, direct eye contact, we view that as confidence. In some African cultures, however, women would avoid eye contact with men. In Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures, there's the cultural belief of the evil eye. Too much eye contact could feel aggressive. Our takeaway here is that eye contact is powerful, but only when it's used with cultural awareness. Now, I like to highlight different cultural things in my communication lectures. The evil eye is something that I encountered for the very first time when I visited Vienna, Austria. And I was taking photos at a popular tourist attraction, this beautiful castle with gardens, and there's a zoo behind it. And a woman comes running across the street yelling at me in a language that I didn't speak or understand. But I could tell from the tone of her voice that she was upset. And she keeps coming closer and closer, and she's yelling, and it's getting louder and louder. And she gets up to me, and she realizes that I don't speak German. And so she speaks in very broken English, and she says, you took my picture. You took picture. And she's pointing at my camera. I had an SLR camera, so this is a physical camera, not an iPhone in my hand. And she's pointing at my camera and she says, you took my picture. You took my picture. And I said, no, I was taking a picture. I'm taking a picture of the castle. She's like pointing to the camera and I'm like, so I'll show her the picture, and the picture, she's in the picture, but it wasn't like a close-up shot of her. And she keeps pointing at the picture. She's like, you took my picture. You took my picture. And I said, I'll delete it. I'll delete it. And I deleted it. And she shook her finger in my face and she turned and she walked away. And I'm like, I'm shocked. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Well, what happened was that culturally, they have a belief in the evil eye, that a person can cause harm, bad luck, or misfortune simply by looking at someone or by taking their picture. And so because I had taken her picture, culturally, there was a belief that a picture could capture your soul. Now that's heavy. Think about that for a second. A picture could capture your soul. I had never heard that before in my life, but I learned an important lesson that day about differences in cultural beliefs. So we tie this into communication because while Western cultures may see eye contact as a sign of honesty and confidence, there are cultures where eye contact is not something that you should do. Conversely, there are cultures where eye contact is not only appropriate, but they make eye contact for much longer periods of time than we make in the United States. And so if we were visiting there, well, that would make us feel uncomfortable because we would think that people were staring.
Staring. What we call staring here in the United States may not be considered staring in other cultures. For instance, in New York City, we're allowed to stare at each other for about 1.28 seconds. That's been measured, it's been well studied. But in the Middle East, that may be extended to anywhere from 4 to 6 seconds. And so what you have to realize is culture is very much dominant in how long we can look at each other. And not just that, but where we can look at each other. We say that in a business setting, you should be looking at this little triangle between the eyes down to the mouth. And in a social setting, that you can descend all the way down to below the chin.
Now we're going to move on to haptics. And haptics is the study of touch in communication. And touch speaks volumes because we use handshakes in Western culture to show respect. We use hugs to show comfort or friendliness. And we pat other people on the back to show encouragement. However, unwanted touch can show intrusion. Touch norms vary, and in the United States, a handshake may be standard, but in Mediterranean cultures, well, hugs and cheek kisses would be the normal. Here's why it matters in communication. Touch, we all have experiences, handshakes, hugs, fist bumps, and it can comfort us, encourage us, or it can shape power dynamics in ways that words can't. It does differ culturally. It is context dependent. It may be appropriate in one setting. You may hug your family or your friends, but you may not go into work and hug your colleagues every day because in that setting, it may be considered awkward or completely inappropriate. There is professional significance, right? In professional and public settings, touch is limited, but we do use handshakes to signal confidence and respect, to greet each other professionally and to seal business deals. Why too much touch or poorly timed touch, though, can damage our credibility. It is important to note here that some people do have touch avoidance. This just simply means that personalities and upbringings differ. Some people are naturally what we would call high touch, meaning they're very touch focused. So these are going to be the people that are constantly hugging you. They're going to be fist bumping you. They're going to be giving you bro handshakes. They're going to be tapping you on the shoulders. However, other people are touch avoidance, where they don't want people that they don't know touching them. And sometimes they don't even want the people they know touching them. Here's an interesting slide that shows the cultural context. When you greet a friend, how many times do you kiss? Yeah, you read that right. When you greet a friend, how many times do you kiss? Think to your interactions here in the United States. How many times do you kiss your friends when you meet them? You probably don't. But if you were in France, not only can you see here, some regions you're going to kiss them once or twice or 3 times, or if you live in the suburbs of Paris, 4 times. Now, this was a survey that studied, if you read there at the bottom, over 100,000 French people responded to this. And outside of Paris, they kissed their friends 4 times on average. That's crazy. But that shows a cultural difference there in how touch is used culturally. Now, I mentioned that touch is at the core of the personal experience. And from the time that we are infants, touch shapes our sense of comfort, our safety and connection. It remains central to how we form bonds and express our emotions throughout life. And touch is unique among our senses because unlike sight or sound, well, touch allows for a shared experience. When 2 people shake hands or they hug or hold hands, both people physically feel that at the same time. Touch is the only sense that creates this kind of simultaneous and mutual experience. And I think that is why it is at the core of our personal experiences. I'm going to be vulnerable here for a moment, if you'll allow me, and I'm going to share a personal story. My great aunt, she passed away almost 2 years ago now. She was like a mother figure to me. She was one of those people that supported me through every endeavor of my life. My greatest cheerleader. My greatest support system. I could call and talk to her about anything. And she loved hearing stories about my students and how my classes were going. You have those people in your life. When my aunt got sick, fortunately, and I use the word fortunately here because it wasn't her passing wasn't unexpected. And that allowed me to be able to travel home to Tennessee and to spend some time with her and to just sit there in the hospital room with her and to talk to her, and to thank her for all of the support and the guidance in my life. And as the days drew nearer to her passing, friends and family would come and go. What I saw time and time again was she was 92 years old, and she had lifelong friends that she had known 50, 60 years, and they would come and they'd come to the hospital room, and at times she could barely speak. And they would lean over the bed, and guess what they would do? They would hold her hand. They would touch her hand. They would place their hand on her hand. They would hold it. And they would talk about experiences that they had shared in life, how important they were to each other. And it was such an incredibly moving and impactful thing to see. It's one of those deep experiences that will forever shape my own lived experiences. And as we neared the end, and I had to come back home to Houston, I stood beside her bed and I also held her hand. And I remember in that moment, just the touch, the feeling of holding her hand and talking to her and just letting her know that I love you and that I'm so thankful and grateful for you and that we will see each other again and that it's okay to go. I'll never forget that experience, and it solidified in my life the importance of touch and haptics in a way that before that I had only taught about it in lectures like this. But when I experienced it, it really shaped that moment. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation with someone that you care about, hold their hand. They always say that their ability to speak and to respond is one of the first things that goes, but that they can hear you and that they can feel you holding their hand or touching their hair, and so do that. Thank you guys for allowing me to share that experience in her memory. When we talk about culture with touch, as we mentioned, it's going to be culture dependent. So in the US, we greet each other with a handshake. It's just something that we do. It's friendly, right? Some researchers believe that the handshake originated in the 5th century BC in ancient Greece as a gesture to demonstrate peace. Back then, a handshake was used to show that you weren't hiding a weapon in your hand and that the person you were greeting wasn't going to, well, decapitate you. But over thousands of years, the handshake has evolved from being more than just about life and death. It's become a prominent gesture that now represents trust and respect in important deals, meetings, and agreements. The handshake is a powerful tool of judgment, arguably as important as any signal that we could send to another human being. And within the first few seconds that a handshake happens, we analyze many variables to determine sincerity of the other person. Researchers believe that the variables we evaluate when doing a handshake include things like strength, temperature, moisture, the fullness of grip, duration, speed, complexity, texture, eye contact. Now that was a lot of things there, and we do that within milliseconds. A handshake, whether good or bad, also has a chemical impact, capable of leaving a long-term memory in your brain. When you complete a good handshake with someone, a hormone in your brain called oxytocin is released, and that primes you to be more likely to trust the person whose hand you're shaking. But in Asian countries, especially Japan, if you were to try to shake someone's hand, well, that would be very aggressive behavior, and people wouldn't respect that. In those situations, a bow would be a much more common greeting. And in some Middle Eastern and Asian countries, well, you would want to make sure that you only ever touch someone with your right hand. And that's because the left hand is considered dirty and unhygienic in those cultures, because the left hand is something that you would use to wipe yourself when you go to the bathroom. Here's some examples of nonverbal communication in the Arab world. You can pause the lecture here and read these to become a more competent and culturally aware communicator. This also has a serious impact professionally. 26% of hiring managers say that a weak handshake is a major turnoff for a job seeker. 67% of hiring managers talk about the lack of eye contact as the biggest mistake a candidate can make. 26%, well, they get rejected because they fidget too much during an interview. 21% of interviewers will reject a candidate who gives a weak handshake, and 39% of interviewers are put off if a candidate fails to smile. So you can see here our nonverbals not only guide us in our personal interactions, but professionally, especially on the job market, they can have a huge impact on whether or not you're successful. 70% of people lack confidence when it comes to handshakes. 19% of you hate it completely, or you're unsure how to do it. But on average, you will shake 15,000 hands in a lifetime. That's crazy. So how do you do it? Well, you use your right hand. As we mentioned, you keep your fingers together, your thumbs up and your palm open to the side. You're going to slide it into the other person's hand, keeping your wrist tight and straight. You're going to give a firm, but not bone crushing. Those are the worst. When you squeeze somebody's fingers and it hurts, you don't want to do that. You're going to give a firm handshake for about 3 seconds. That's 1 or 2 pumps of your hand up and down while you maintain eye contact with the other person before you release their hands. You don't want to position your hand on top or below because it can be dominating or submissive. You don't want to move your hand too close to the other person, and you don't want to have cold or wet hands. That could be off-putting to someone shaking your hands. Now, if you're nervous and you have anxiety, well, that can make it a little bit more difficult. And there are some tips and things that you can do for that. Don't keep a drink in your hand beforehand, or if your hands really sweat, here's a tip that I give my students in my public speaking class. They sell sweat blocker wipes on Amazon, and they come in little packets like a lens cleaner packet, and you take them and you just wipe your hands 6 hours before, and it keeps your hands from sweating. It's amazing the difference in technology and products that we now have versus 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're now going to talk about clothing. What do your clothes say about you? I love this quote. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. You see, before you say a word, your appearance has already spoken. Clothing, grooming, accessories, jewelry, all the things that we wear, the types of cars that we drive, all of those things send signals. Research shows that this affects not just how other people see us, but how we also see ourselves. Our self-confidence is impacted. If you ever dress up for an event, or you go out and you put a little bit more effort in, like if I'm in a suit, I just feel better. I feel more confident. I walk with my head held a little bit higher in those instances versus if you ever see me out in life in tennis shoes and a baseball cap and a tank top, that's what I'm going to be wearing in my day-to-day life. It makes you feel different. And we call that enclothed cognition, how our clothes impact our self-confidence. We also see it. Uniforms carry authority. A suit also may boost our credibility in a presentation, but yet we wouldn't wear a suit to a barbecue. That would be a little bit ridiculous. Sometimes even not caring about the way that we look or the clothes that we're wearing, well, that can send a message. It could say, you know what, this just isn't my priority. So the takeaway here is that dress is also part of our communication, and it can set the tone before you ever even speak. Again, in public speaking, I tell my students, if you want to build credibility from the very beginning, dress professionally, because we judge people all the time without ever hearing them speak by just looking at their appearance and what they're wearing. Now let's talk about chromatics, and this is the use of color in communication. I find this so fascinating because you see colors talk. In the United States, you'll see a lot of brides wear white as a symbol of purity, of simplicity. But yet in China, a bride may also wear red. In Western culture, we wear black at funerals to symbolize mourning. However, in a lot of other cultures, in Eastern cultures, you would wear white to a funeral, not black, because you're wearing white as a celebration of that person's life. So you see here, color communicates, but it communicates differently based off of life experiences and cultural differences. There's a really cool article that I'll link in this week's materials that talks about what the color of your tie says about you, where it says if you should always wear a blue tie to an interview because it signals calmness, credibility, and signals that you're a professional. This was another interesting article that said there was a psychology of fashion that says when we wear black or white solid shirts, we feel more confident versus when we wear striped shirts. Next, let's talk about proxemics. And proxemics is the use of space. All about space, our personal bubbles. Now, Edward T. Hall identified 4 zones in the U.S. culture: intimate, personal, social, and public. Now, these are different zones of space in which he says we are comfortable with other people that we don't know. Intimate, 0 inches to 18 inches away from your body. You're only going to allow people that you're super close to. Family, super close friends, or romantic partners are going to be the only people that you let get that close to your personal space. Personal friends, you're going to let 18 inches to 4 feet. These are going to be people that you know and that you trust, and you're going to let them stay 4 feet from you, but not any closer than 18 inches. Otherwise, you're going to be uncomfortable. In social settings, we like to keep a little bit more distance, 4 to 12 feet. In public settings, we prefer even more distance, 12 plus feet from people that we don't know if we're out in public. Anything closer is going to make us feel uncomfortable. We also see proxemics in power and statuses. It could be in terms of offices. Your boss's office is probably going to be a corner office with a window view, and you may be in a cubicle inside away from the window. That signifies power and status. There are examples of when we violate our own norms in terms of space. For example, when we get into an elevator, we're going to branch off into corners, and then we're going to equally space ourselves from people, and you look straight ahead and you don't make eye contact and you don't talk to people in an elevator. That's just the unspoken cultural norm. If you're in a big city or you're walking down a crowded street, you'll also temporarily suspend your norms around space because you understand that you're not going to be able to maintain 12 feet from you and a stranger that you don't know. And there are things that would make us uncomfortable. For instance, these 2 businessmen traveling somewhere at an airport. I don't care if I travel all over the world with you. If there are 5 empty seats there, as we see in this picture, I am not going to sit right beside you. I am going to sit in another chair and to have some space. Now, we can use space to our advantage. We can use it to build engagement. And so as an effective communicator, think about the space around you as part of your toolkit to be an effective communicator. Every position is going to send a signal, so we can use it to our advantage to pull people in, to engage with them. So here's my quick tip for you. If you want more interaction from people, put them in a circle. I do what's called a friendship circle. We'll get into a circle and we'll do ice-breaking activities and we'll do class activities over the course of the semester in a circle. They feel more like we are peers, that we all have value in that space. If you want less interaction from people, well, put them in a traditional classroom seating. I want more interaction with my students, so I will always put people in a circle. If you work in a professional setting and you want to get people more engaged, more involved, you want to build community and make them feel that they're part of a team, try this. Put them in a circle, and you'll see that difference in terms of how people engage with you and how they start to view each other. We also have territoriality in terms of communication and space, and this is just the sense of personal ownership that is attached to a space. You see people mark and defend their territory even in shared environments. If you've ever walked into a classroom, a meeting room, or a cafeteria, you're going to mark that space with your personal items, a purse, a backpack, books, jackets, food. You're going to put something down in that space to say, hey, this space is occupied. When people violate that territory, for instance, sitting in someone's seat in a classroom, well, it can make people feel uncomfortable and sometimes even angry. If you think about a physical classroom setting, I always have students, they come in and I don't have seating arrangements or seating charts, but they tend to sit in the same areas all semester long. Wherever they sit on the first day is where they tend to sit the next class and every class after that. And it's because we have this sense of territoriality, this sense of personal ownership attached to a space. It makes us feel comfortable. It's a soothing type of thing. If you walk into class, say we're into the week 3 of class, and you walk into a physical classroom and someone is sitting in your space, you're gonna give them the side eye. You may even make some noises and nonverbals as you walk by. You're probably gonna go and turn around and look at them. And guess what you're going to do the next class? You're going to show up early. You're going to claim your seat back because it's your space. And so see, respecting territorial claims, it can help us maintain harmony, whereas failing to respect them can create tension, conflict, and sometimes a little bit of discomfort. There are 3 main types of territory that we see. We see primary territories, and this is spaces that you own or you control exclusively. For example, your bedroom, your office, or your car. When people violate social norms for those spaces, it really bothers us. This is why, as teenagers, you hated it when your parents came into your room, because that room is your space. You own it. You control it. Even if they're making the mortgage payment. That is a primary territory, and that is why we become so attached to how we feel about those spaces and sharing those spaces with others. We have secondary territories, and these are spaces that we don't own, but we regularly claim or use them. And the example of your seat in a classroom, or your favorite chair at home, your spot at the gym. As we wrap up today's lecture, we're going to talk about paralanguage, and these are vocalics. This is the how behind our words, the tone, the pitch, the volume, the speed, pauses. It all shapes meaning. And that's why I love you means something very different to us than come here, I love you. It was the same sentence, but yet it had different meanings based off of the tone and the inflection of different words in that phrase. That's paralanguage, or vocalics. Pauses matter too. A pause can make you sound thoughtful or nervous. Speak too fast and you sound passionate or frantic. Speak too slow and you sound calm or boring. Even whispering carries meaning. It can have secrecy, intimacy, or fear. You see, your voice isn't just the delivery system for words. It's part of the message. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is time. And this is how we use time to send messages. If you're early to an interview, well, that says that you're eager and reliable. If you're late to class every day, well, that says to me that you don't think class is important. If you take the time to listen fully to someone, you're saying, I value you. If you rush someone, you're saying, I don't. You see, culture matters too in the U.S. When you say on time, that really means early. In other cultures, arriving late would be considered the norm. How you use time communicates just as loudly as what you have to say. In closing, nonverbal communication is everywhere. Our faces, our touch, our clothing, our space, our silence. The truth is, we can't not communicate. Every gesture, every pause, every choice of space or color can send a message. The real question is, are you sending the message you intend?